supposed to be happy to be here. Of course. Okay. Always. You always say that whether you are or not.
Happy to be in this house.
Are you going to be happy to be here on Thursday?
No.
You don't have to listen to me lecture.
I'd rather hear you lecture.
Is it that bad? You'd rather listen to me lecture?
Yes.
I'd rather listen to 2 lectures in a row.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
Rapid lecture.
My rabbit lecture. My rabbit lecture is awesome, especially if you like rabbits. If you don't like rabbits, then you think I'm insane. All right. Today we'll get done fairly, I'm assuming, fairly short today. I want to finish up the information on puberty, the rest of the slides. Before we do that, I'll review a little bit. Don't forget, obviously, I don't think I have to remind you, your exam is on Thursday. I have completed it. It is all short answers. I don't remember how many questions, but it's, we got plenty of time, but it's going to take you a while. It's a little longer probably than usual. So this will all be short answer. For those, did I address this? I can't remember who I told what to. If I said the whole group or not. There are no, just for confusion, there are no diagrams to label or pictures to label. Did I say that? Yeah. Okay. Because I don't do that. So there's none of that. It's all just short answer stuff. So study details and all that stuff we're going to talk about. So I want to finish up the slides on puberty, but before we do that, I want to kind of go back a little bit and review. So tell me, let's use this setup here. I like this. Okay, so if this board here is prepubertal state, tell me about the prepubertal state here relative to the functionality of the hypothalamus. Okay, so the hypothalamus, I'm just going to kind of abbreviate. Hypo is delighted to have low functionality. Because it's not mature yet. It's physically not mature. So if the hypothalamus, by the way, does that include both the male and the female?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Again, what's the difference in male and female?
Female has a surge center.
Okay, female has a surge center, male has only a tonic center, right? Female has a tonic center?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So if the hypothalamus is lowly, I don't want to use the term poorly because it's nothing wrong with it. It's just lowly functioning. What about hormone levels?
Very low, estrogen low.
Well, before that, what else? What's going to be low first?
GnRH.
GnRH is going to be low, right? And GnRH is low what? FSH is low, LH is low, what else is low? Estrogen low, all that stuff low. Is there any pattern to GnRH production pre-pubertal? No. It's low level, there's no consistent pattern, anything like that. What about the male? Same thing. What about FSH levels in the male, LH levels in the male? Estrogen levels in the male. For what they're worth, they're low. Testosterone levels low. Okay. So that's the prepubertal state. Okay, good. Now let's go over here. I love this. Post-pubertal. Post-pubertal. Let's separate it though. Let's do female first. Tell me about it. Tell me about the hypothalamus and its functionality post. Now, remember we skipped a whole bunch of steps here, right? That's what we're talking about today. So tell me about the functionality of the hypothalamus post-pubertal. Sexually mature here.
Highly functioning.
Okay? So it's fully functioning, it works, that's right. So we're going to go hypo plus, right? We're going to say it's all good. What about in the female, what about GnRH?
It's very uniform.
Okay. So it's a consistent pattern of GnRH production. Now remember, we got to start adding to this. You now in the female have a fully functioning hypothalamus, but what does that mean exactly?
Simplicity.
You have a fully functioning tonic center and a fully functioning surge center. What is the difference in those two areas as far as their production of GnRH?
Tonic is more consistent, surge goes up and down.
Oh, well, okay. So what does the tonic center in a fully functioning, mature hypothalamus in the female do? What does the tonic center, a fully functioning tonic center in a sexually mature female do?
GnRH. It's producing GnRH.
How? That's the key. It is producing GnRH, you're correct. How is it producing? Remember the graph at a steady level, steady state, straight line, okay, tonic level. So if we were to draw GnRH level straight line, that would be tonics, okay? That's correct. So what about the surge center?
It reacts when estrogen levels get a peak.
Okay. So when the surge center is producing you're correct, but when the surge center is producing GnRH, how is it producing it? As a surge. Okay. So it's going to look something like that. Okay? And we looked at these graphs already. Now, back to what Autumn was saying. So now let's add a little bit to this. That's all correct. That's what a fully functioning hypothalamus would look like from the surge center here, GnRH, the tonic center, all of this, surge center here, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So let's backtrack a little bit. What is going to stimulate that surge center to surge?
Estrogen levels.
Estrogen levels reaching a threshold level, what it is for that particular animal in that species. Okay, it varies. So estrogen has to reach some sort of a level. So I'm going to just put estrogen with a little star there. It's got to reach the threshold level before GnRH surges because that has to stimulate the surge center to surge. Okay, that makes sense. So once GnRH surges, then what happens? Okay, because we got to get a surge of GnRH. It's not causing the start of ovulation, is it? But it's going to start that cascade to get to a surge in LH, right? So if we have a surge in GnRH, we're going to have a subsequent surge in LH. And then what's going to happen after that surge in LH? Shortly after there, somewhere, depending on the animal, we're going to have ovulation commence in response to that surge. Now, let me add one, everybody good on that? Let me add one more thing to this. What about FSH? Remember, FSH, it's different when it comes to how it is produced because these surges of GnRH are really there for purposes of surging LH. That's why GnRH surges, to surge LH, to cause ovulation to start. What about FSH, though? If I were to talk about FSH at this hint,
Yeah, it's extremely high as well, but as soon as the surge happens, well, we're releasing that follicle, which is ovulation, so now there's no need for
FSH, okay. I don't totally disagree with that, but you're right, but you're more talking about right here, or more like over here, where we got FSH going up and then it drops off in response to inhibin and all that stuff. What about over here?
Is it steadily rising?
It's steadily rising. Why did I talk about hint there?
because they go together.
Right, because estrogen is also going to be steadily rising. What's causing estrogen to steadily rise? FSH steadily rising, because we have FSH causing folliculogenesis, more granulosa cells, more estrogen, and all that stuff we're talking about. Does that make sense? So it all kind of plays together. Well, we're ultimately getting sexual receptivity starting to commence as we approach ovulation. You've got follicular growth as we approach ovulation. All is going to happen at the same time. We hope fertilization is going to happen as well. Does that all make sense? That's a jumbled mess on the board, but does that make sense? Okay, so here's the question. Now, I'm warning you, this is going to, we've got to change the rules a little bit, so hang on. What's happening in here? We go from that to that. Oh, by the way, before we do that, male, we forgot the boys. Tell me about the boys here. Boys are boring, right?
They just have a tonic.
No surge center, just a tonic center. When a fully functioning tonic center in the male is working, what's it doing? Steady state GnRH, which means steady state. Well, before that, she says steady state testosterone. She's correct, but before that, LH. Steady state GnRH causes steady state LH causes steady state testosterone. Okay. And for the most part, FSH is pretty steady state as well, just to kind of maintain kind of constant sperm development. So what about in between there? We've got an immature hypothalamus. We've got to get to a mature hypothalamus. Okay, that's easy. All that happens is literally a physical maturing of that gland. As the animal is growing, it is literally becoming more mature. As it matures, it's going to become more functional. Pretty obvious. But the question becomes, what is ultimately going to get us to the point in the female now? We're going to focus female first. The male is easier. get us to the point where we're going to have that very first surge. What's got to get us to that point? Well, if we go back to kind of this, remember we're talking very first surge she's ever going to have of GnRH. How are we going to ever get to that very first surge? It's all about getting estrogen levels up. How do we get estrogen levels up? We have nothing to get them up with, or do we? We might, okay? This, and I want you to make a highlighted, put a bracket around it, whatever. Those second and third bullet points, those, and it's important that you note this, those are the state of a pre-pubertal female. Well, pre-pubertal male and female. Again, the male's a little simpler in this process. That's the state of it in a pre-pubertal animal. So the question becomes, something about that has to change as we approach sexual maturation, and it does. In the pre-pubertal, and some of this we've already talked about, but now we're adding to it. In the pre-pubertal animal, the surge center can be positively affected by estrogen. Why is it not in a pre-pubertal animal? The surge center can be positively affected by estrogen in a pre-pubertal animal, but why isn't it?
Estrogen doesn't get high enough.
Yeah, estrogen level is low. Right. That's fine and dandy. That rule doesn't really change anything. What changes everything, and this is kind of a surprise, is that the tonic center is what ultimately is going to get us to the point of the first surge. The tonic center has, in a pre-pubertal female, estrogen has a negative effect on the tonic center. Well, guess what changes? In a post-pubertal female, does the surge center have a positive effect from estrogen? Yes. Guess what? In a post-pubertal female, the tonic center also does, but not in a pre-pubertal female. So what has to happen between a pre-pubertal and a post-pubertal female relative to the tonic center? It becomes less affected by estrogen's negative influence. And that's the key. If we allow the tonic center to turn on a little bit, what happens is slowly, this is again a good thing, to slowly increase the level of GnRH coming from the tonic center. Okay. And it's a very, what is that process called? Those two boards. Where that tonic center is becoming less influenced by the negative effects of estrogen, what's that process called? Puberty. Now that's puberty, those two boards there. So this will make more sense in just a minute, hopefully. This is a diagram. I kind of summarize everything on this. Left side female, right side male. Notice the male is a little simpler, but the same thing is happening. Now I've taken some things out of here, or did not include, because they weren't that important. So as I mentioned, and this is what's happening during puberty, the female's tonic center, again we're keying on the tonic center, is becoming less sensitive to estrogen's negative feedback that might be there. And it can be controlled at very low levels of estrogen pre-pubertal. If the tonic center is no longer negatively influenced at all by, or that's being removed, what's happening to GnRH levels?
They're rising.
Are they surging? No, because we're talking about tonic center. But they're going up because the tonic center is, first of all, becoming mature, so it can do its job a little better, and it's becoming less sensitive because of that maturation to any estrogen, any negative effect of estrogen, so it's able to start pumping out at low levels GnRH. If we have, here we go, if we have GnRH levels creeping up in response to that increased functionality of the tonic center, what's going to happen to at the follicular level? What is happening? If we have a increasing level of GnRH, what's going to happen to FSH?
Increase.
It's going to start going up a little bit too, right? And if we have FSH start to go up a little bit, just a little bit, what's going to happen to the follicle growth? It's going to start to go up a little bit. What's going to happen to those granulosa cells? They start, and so we then get estrogen levels start to go up. So if this were GnRH right here, we could slowly draw a sort of a parallel line, that would be, if this is GnRH here, this could be FSH, and the other one could be estrogen. So they kind of parallel each other. So ultimately, though, we've got to get to what for that first surge? No, this is going on in puberty. What do we have to get to for the first surge?
The threshold level of estrogen.
We've got to get that threshold level of estrogen. And once we get that estrogen, so can you see the variation of puberty length in a female? What if a female develops very slowly? It takes her a long time for the estrogen to creep up to reach the threshold. But what if she develops very quickly? She gets her, that's the slope of that line be a little higher. Ultimately, we've got to get to the threshold level, whatever that is, to stimulate that first surge in GnRH, where we're actually coming into play the surge center and its effect, or it being affected by estrogen. Okay. So as you think about this, keep in mind this is all driven in puberty by the tonic center physically becoming mature. And when it becomes mature, it's no longer able to be held down by any estrogens floating around in there. And so it can start, because that negative effect it grows out of it. And so it starts to pump out very low levels, but increasing, of GnRH. Along with that, of course, we'd see FSH levels going up. Along with that, we'd see estrogen levels going up, ultimately reaching that threshold level of estrogen eventually. It could take a long time. Depends on the animal. But ultimately, she's going to get to that threshold level of estrogen, so what's going to happen? We're going to stimulate the surge center. That first surge happens. That's her first surge. And then then she goes into cyclicity from then on, right? We assume, under normal management and all that stuff. Does that make sense? So it's all about the tonic center. It's all about the tonic center in puberty. It's not about the surge center. Surge center doesn't even come into play until after puberty. It's all about the tonic center. Now, what about the male? Well, the male is a lot simpler because the male only has a tonic center, but the same thing's taking place. So if this were a male, let me redraw this, sort of. What would these three lines be in the male? Because it's going to be the same trend. Because we've got a tonic center that's not fully functioning over there, and we've got a tonic center only here that is fully functioning. So the tonic center is also becoming less sensitive to estrogen affecting the male, because estrogen plays the role in the male as well. But if I were to draw these three lines, what are the lines in the male? Okay, GnRH, right, that's easy. Okay, FSH. Not estrogen. You're right. Can I add another one? LH. I can actually add another line here. Because in the male's boring, because the male's pretty much a straight line. Now, my lines are terrible, so you have to just bear with me. That would be LH, right? So they're all kind of paralleling each other. But here's the kicker. I'm going to get extra stuff today. If this is your pick your hormone, let's just use testosterone, because they all build to testosterone, right? GnRH. So if that's your testosterone prepubertal load, what's your straight line load? What's your testosterone over here?
Slightly higher straight line.
Higher, but still straight line. You're not trying to get to a threshold level of estrogen or testosterone, whatever, to cause a surge, because it doesn't exist. All you're trying to do is reach for that particular animal's genetic potential, their highest level of natural testosterone production. So it's all a matter, and this is pretty common sense, is that between prepubertal and postpubertal, we have a gradual increase in testosterone level to get to the high level, the highest level we're going to have postpubertal. But again, it's steady state. But it's increasing during puberty. And again, that all relates to the tonic center, and the tonic center starting to produce GnRH, and that's going to obviously affect LH and testosterone. Does that make sense? It's the same thing, and exactly the same thing. We just kind of replaced testosterone with estrogen, or estrogen with testosterone, but we haven't surge center. So there's no effect on the surge center in the male, obviously. So it's a little bit simpler in the male. Does that make sense? Again, focus on the tonic center becoming mature and it being able to start to produce more GnRH because it's growing out of this pressure that this estrogen is having on it, this negative effect holding it down. It's fighting off estrogen so it can start to function a little bit better. And that's pretty much just a summation of everything in a graph. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Okay, this stuff's easy. We really already talked about it. No big deal here. You already know this. This is very generic as far as what animals would come from, but of course, and it's out of your book. Prepubertal LH levels, not necessarily remarkable here. Postpubertal. By the way, if I look at this, does it say it on here? It does not. That's good. I mean, this is obvious, I think. What sex is that from?
Female.
Did I hear male? Is it male or is it female?
Female.
Female. How do I know female?
Surges.
Right, you got surges of LH. Now, this is only LH. I could add in a bunch of other stuff here too. All of us do it. Where is my surge in GnRH? If I were to ask you, and I would not do this on a test, but just to know it, where would I draw in my surge in GnRH?
Before that.
Huh? Where would I draw my surge in GnRH?
Before the LH.
Before the surge in LH. Where would I draw my, not surge, my increasing estrogen levels? Before GnRH. Okay. And where would I draw ovulation? A little bit of a lag time after the surge in LH. Just a little. It's not going to, never believe anybody they tell you this, that you say, okay, that point right there is where ovulation takes place. That is not where ovulation takes place. That's where the surge took place. But that surge is the trigger. There's a lag time between that surge and when things start to happen that breaks the follicular membrane and causes ovulation. So we'll talk more about that later on. Again, this is very generic diagram. Here is also stuff we've talked about, also very generic. I will point out again, and this is just to reiterate the information, estrogen does not look like that normally, so take that with a grain of salt. They're just trying to show the point here, make the point. That is, it looks like a surge in estrogen. Estrogen does not surge. That will be much more gradual incline to estrogen to reach that threshold level. And yes, that highest level of estrogen would represent the threshold. That would also represent the time when she is maximally, is that a word? Reaches maximum sexual receptivity. Okay. Again, this is artificial, but you can see it. Where would I draw our GnRH?
Before the LH.
Between the estrogen and the LH, right? Because that estrogen is really not having a direct effect on LH surge, right? It's a direct effect in GnRH surge. So it would make these simpler probably if they could, the GnRH. Now, in between here, just as a review, what part of the hypothalamus is, in this case, indirectly controlling that LH level in here? What part of the hypothalamus is indirectly controlling that? And why do I say indirectly?
Indirectly controlling what?
That area in between these surges. The tonic. Indirectly. Why do I say indirectly? Because that's LH, not GnRH. If I were to draw GnRH on there, that would be a direct effect. Well, what would GnRH line look like? Just the same thing. Just another line. Nothing to really talk about. Steady state. Now, and this is not all that important up here, but if I blow up a little area, you'll notice this is, because if you're in the back there, that looks kind of like a straight line. But if I come up here to it, it looks kind of fuzzy, like boom, boom, boom. If I blow that up, look at these are not surges though. These are not surges. They're little, what we call episodic blips, just little ups and downs. It's still steady state, so don't read too much into that. That's all controlled by the tonic center. Now I want to jump down to the male. The male is interesting. If I'm back in the back and I look at that right there, what does it look like? A wide straight line. If I come up here and look at it though, it looks like that, but they're not surges. If I blow it up, I can see that. Now they've actually indicated here for you LH and testosterone. But these are, again, episodic blips of LH and testosterone response to that. But I want to key in on why we have it like this, and we've touched on this before. So LH levels go up here in this little blip. I'm going to call it a blip. Okay, very low amplitude. What happens in response to that first, let's use this one. What happens in response to that first little LH blip? Testosterone is produced by the Leydig cells in response, and it also goes up in sort of a parallel pattern. Here's the question: why does testosterone go back down? Because in theory, if you poke the Leydig cell and say make that testosterone, it makes it. Boom! It starts producing it, and it, in theory, would keep going. Theoretically, what causes testosterone to go back down? We talked about it.
Negative feedback.
Who said it? I heard negative feedback. On what? The testosterone has a when it reaches a certain point, it has a negative feedback on the tonic center of the hypothalamus to cause what to happen? GnRH levels go back down, in response LH levels go back down, and then testosterone goes down. That's how we can, and we mentioned this a few times, that's how we control testosterone to prevent it from quote unquote surging out of control. That's how we maintain steady state. So again, testosterone, that's why it goes back down when it reaches that. And that level there that's the individual. That depends on the animal or the person. But once it reaches that particular level, that is where it's going to have a negative feedback on the hypothalamus to cause GnRH levels to go back down, LH levels to go back down, and then of course testosterone response. Again, these are not surges, they're episodic little blips. It's still steady state or flat line. Can we change the level of testosterone in the way we manage an animal? Can we adjust? Can we make this overall level change? Can we make this overall level go up or down?
Yes.
Probably harder to make it go up, at least under natural circumstances. Can we make it go down?
Yes.
Yeah, the way we manage animals, sometimes in the summertime, when animals are heat stressed, testosterone levels will go down. Because why? Because we needed testosterone to help not cause spermatogenesis, but to help out with spermatogenesis. So it kind of goes along with that, right? Because we don't need spermatogenesis theoretically in the summertime. Why? Why do we tend to cut down on, if you will, sperm production in the summertime?
Because you're not breathing.
It's hot, okay, and y'all are correct, but what are we trying to do there? Remember, it goes back to that one thing I kept saying several times, male and female. It's not about reproduction, it's about survival. So if the animal becomes stressed, particularly heat stress, what is that animal trying to put its energy towards? Cooling itself, or maintaining body temperature, not making sperm cells. So those levels of sperm production can go down along with testosterone levels can go down as well. But again, overall, under normal circumstances, we got flatline testosterone. I think we've made that point. Okay. Y'all any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
You said that estrogen doesn't surge, right?
Estrogen is not ever considered a surge.
So how come in that last slide that it went with LH?
That's what I would say. You know, which one are you? Back up. Let me make sure you're talking about the right one. Are you talking about here?
Yeah.
Oops. Right there?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I said. That looks like a surge. That's not. Your book's wrong. That's an artificial diagram. In an actual animal, it would never look like that. And we'll look at some endocrine graphs that are more realistic for animals later in the semester. All they're trying to indicate to you here is that high estrogen levels are going to lead to that threshold level that's going to stimulate the hypothalamus. It does not look like that. It's going to be, and I can't hold this steady enough, but if I were to draw estrogen, it would look more like that to get to that. It's like a, versus, roller coaster when you're climbing that first hill, it's more like that than that. In real life. This is just trying to indicate to you the fact that estrogen has to reach a threshold level. Does that make sense? So that's a bit artificial. Good question. Anything else on any of that before we finish up with pulse generator? Okay. Now I will admit, and you're going to see this relative to your book, a lot about this we still do not understand. We are understanding more of this. In fact, between the last edition of your book and this edition of your book, things have changed as we're learning more about this particular system. The pulse generator is, and this is particularly important to female, this is, because we've mentioned this, it goes back to what you said really, is what is not a priority for an animal? Reproduction. But if a female or a male to a lesser extent is in a positive energy state or positive energy balance, what does that say?
Taking care of it.
Everything they need for maintenance, for homeostasis has been met. So now we've got a little extra energy, extra nutrients, however you want to look at it, to be able to reproduce. The question becomes, how does the animal detect these things? And that's what the pulse generator actually is. It's the mechanism by which a female detects her body composition state. We're focusing on two things, though. We're focusing on circulating glucose, and we're focusing on stored fat. Makes sense, right? If you're in a positive energy balance, what are you likely to be doing? Where's that extra energy going? Probably the stored body fat. If you're in a positive energy balance, are you going to have low level? Again, this is assuming normal physiology, but are you going to have a normally a elevated level of blood glucose or a low level of blood glucose of your positive energy state?
Elevated.
You're going to have a high, not high, but you're not in a low blood glucose state. Right? If you're in a negative energy balance, you would be, obviously. So those are the two things, principally, that we're trying to detect here. How much stored body fat, and there's an aside to that relative to circulating fatty acids because of metabolism, and how much glucose is in the blood. Now, these are not mutually exclusive. That means that basically, if you're in a positive energy state, all three of these areas, boom, boom, and boom, are going to be stimulated. If you're in a negative energy state, all three of those areas are not going to be stimulated. If you are stimulating these areas, that is saying to the hypothalamus that you are in a positive energy state. That's the bottom line. If these areas are being stimulated, then you're in a positive energy state. Now, they've done a good job of drawing this. These yellow balls here, and we'll actually look at this again in a different area when it comes to seasonality and seasonal periods and physiology of that. But these yellow balls here would represent hypothalamic nuclei, which we know what those do, right? Those are producing axons, producing generators. We talked about that. That's represented by these yellow balls. The difference here, though, are these green balls. These green balls are intermediary neurons called kisspeptin neurons. Now, they're called kisspeptin neurons because they make a chemical called kisspeptin that's a neurotransmitter. Understand, though, if kisspeptin neurons are making kisspeptin, meaning they're being stimulated, what does that do to these hypothalamic nuclei? If the kisspeptin neurons are being stimulated, which means they are making kisspeptin, what is happening to these hypothalamic nuclei? They're also being stimulated. If the kisspeptin neurons are not being stimulated, thus not making kisspeptin, the neurotransmitter, what's happening to the hypothalamic nuclei? They are not being stimulated, and thus they would not make GnRH. Okay? See where we're going with this? It's all about stimulating kisspeptin neurons to ultimately stimulate hypothalamic nuclei to produce GnRH. Attached to these kisspeptin neurons are specific sensing neurons. They actually sense it in the blood. They're sensing a couple different things. They're sensing, this is the easy one, this is sensing blood glucose. An animal that is in a positive energy balance is going to have a higher level of blood glucose, so that would stimulate these, this is not rocket science again, stimulate these glucose sensing neurons. You got it? These are neurons that sense glucose in the blood. Okay. If the animal is in a positive energy state, they're going to have higher levels of blood glucose. These are going to be stimulated in response to that. They're going to detect it, be stimulated. What's going to happen to kisspeptin neurons? They're going to be stimulated. They're going to produce kisspeptin neurotransmitter. What's going to happen to the hypothalamic nuclei? And thus, GnRH is going to be produced. Okay? Again, these are not mutually exclusive, but it's going to be happening if they're in a positive energy state. All of this is going to be happening in all three of those areas. If they're in negative energy states, none of it's going to be happening. So that one's easy. So glucose sensing neurons are sensing the glucose in the blood. Let's jump down to this one here because it is also fairly simple. The name is easy to remember. Fatty acid sensing neurons, they are sensing fatty acids in the blood. What does fatty acids in the blood tell you? If you're in a positive energy state, you're going to have more fatty acids in the blood or less fatty acids in the blood? More. Why? Because you're moving fatty acids to the tissue level to store them ultimately as triglycerides or stored body fat. So you're going to have higher levels. So here we go. If you're in a positive energy state, you're going to have higher levels of blood fatty acids. Thus, these are going to be stimulated. Stimulating these, stimulating this, cause generation. Okay? So boom, boom, boom. Now this is where it gets a little bit, not confusing, it's just kind of a secondary step here. There's another, again, kisspeptin here, there's another set of neurons called neuropeptide Y neurons. Neuropeptide Y neurons specifically detect a hormone called leptin. That leptin is a hormone. And guess what produces that hormone? Fat. The adipocytes, the fat cells, stored fat in fat cells, they produce a hormone called leptin. So if I have a lot of stored body fat, what's going to be my overall level of leptin? High. If I'm in a positive energy state, I've got more stored body fat, I've got more circulating leptin. Make sense? So leptin indicates literally how much stored body fat an animal has. And again, neuropeptide Y would detect that level of blood leptin. If it's high, it's going to be stimulatory, affect the kisspeptin neurons, or stimulate those to cause them to produce kisspeptin. It's ultimately going to stimulate the hypothalamic nuclei to cause them to release generation. Now you'll notice these question marks here. Don't focus on those. Those are things we are not sure about yet.
Will it affect it if it's ever too high?
Will what be too high?
Like any of those? Like if you have a lot of glucose.
To affect this system? No.
Okay.
No. Now, you open up a can of worms, though, because when we talk about does it affect this system, no. But if we have, obviously, you've got tons of stored body fat in an animal. If they have some abnormal glucose levels, that would all indirectly affect reproduction. But as far as affecting this system, no. Yeah, good question. Again, for studying, don't worry about the question marks. We're going to assume what we know. And what we know is the things that are not questioned. Now, in the next edition of your book, maybe we change. But right now, we're going to focus on this. We're going to focus on neuropeptide Ys, detect blood leptin, the glucose sensing neurons detect glucose, and the fatty acid sensing neurons detect the circulating amount of fatty acids in the blood. All of these, again, are working through these intermediary kisspeptin neurons. And ultimately, they're attached to the hypothalamic nuclei to stimulate the hypothalamic nuclei to cause them to release generation. That's the pulse generator. Okay. So again, trying to detect the energy state of that animal. If a female was in a negative energy state, tell me about what's going on here. Are we going to get any stimulation? No. So what happens if she's in a negative energy state? Her level of generation production is fairly low and she's not cyclical. Does that make sense? If she's in a negative energy state, she doesn't need to cycle. Because we don't need to prioritize reproduction. That's the time we need to prioritize survivability. Does that make sense? Okay.
Is that why we have seasonal ovulators?
Do what?
Is that why there are some animals that are seasonal ovulators?
Yeah, we'll get to all that. Yeah, the seasonality plays into this too, especially those kisspeptin neurons. We'll actually, after the exam, we'll get into some of that. Any questions at all on this or anything else? Any questions about exam items as you've been studying? Any confusion? Then you can go back over. I know that's an open-ended question to ask. Yes, sir. Do what? Yes. Yeah. I would prefer you not take it just for my own benefit, but no, yeah, you got the whole hour.
There were like disease on the like this that I'm nutrition with that weren't in the book or like in the fossil case.
Do you remember what they were?
Not really, and I left it at home. One
Yeah.
of them started with like a like PR or like.
Oh, okay. She asked a question. It was good because I did. I don't want to apologize for it because I'm doing the best I can with it. But this identification thing's throwing me off because I usually do stuff in the lab with it. So that's you've heard that story before. But I did, and was hoping that would help a little bit, and maybe it did. For the mail, I posted that list of terms, that's what I use in the lab. She mentioned a couple of the terms on that list. If you didn't look at the terms list, don't worry. It's not, as long as you focus on what was covered in here. But if you did use the terms list and the terms that were on there I didn't mention, they didn't come out of my mouth, don't worry about it. The pre-use was one, and I don't know what.
There was like 2 more.
Yeah.
That, like,
If I
were in the
didn't,
notes.
if I didn't mention it, don't worry about it.
Okay.
There was a couple things in female too that I forgot to mention. So if I didn't talk about it here, don't worry about it.
Okay.
And we'll hopefully get back to that when we do maybe eventually do some anatomy stuff. And all that.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, if you have any questions between now and Thursday, feel free to email. Study hard. I will see you on Thursday. 4 years ago.